I don't really know what to say here. I don't know what to say to her. I can't tell. I don't know. I can't. It's not really.
The courtroom inhaled as one, and in that single held breath, the family's carefully curated myth began to choke. The silence wasn't ordinary. It had weight, the kind of silence that holds its breath before history rearranges itself. Dust motes hovered in the stale morning light like small witnesses waiting to testify, and even the wooden benches seemed to stiffen as if bracing for the tremor they somehow sensed was coming. The air smelled of polished oak and old paper, official, rigid, and brittle. The way truth often smells when it's been filed away too long. No one spoke, yet every heartbeat in that room seemed to throb in unison, a chorus of anticipation wrapped in disbelief. The walls had heard lies before, practiced statements, tears rehearsed for sympathy, love twisted into justification. But what was about to unfold went beyond any of that. This was not a hearing. This was reckoning. Meri Brown's entrance should have been a whisper, a tremor of accusation folded into a sober afternoon. Instead, it detonated like a verdict delivered in fire. The heavy door creaked open with a sound that seemed almost deliberate. A declaration, not an accident. She stood there, framed in the doorway, light spilling behind her, her figure cutting the air with quiet authority. Her coat was drawn close around her like armor, its black fabric swallowing the morning brightness. In her right hand, she held a manila folder, so swollen with documents, it seemed to hum under its own gravity. Those who noticed it couldn't stop looking. It was too ordinary a thing, paper, ink, staples, to hold the kind of power it clearly did. But everyone in that room, from the judge to the camera crews, crouched behind their tripods, understood instinctively this folder was no prop. It was truth, sealed and patient. Cameras blinked as she walked past, the artificial flashes colliding with the dull yellow courtroom lights, turning her every step into an echo. Reporters stopped mid-sentence, pens frozen over notepads. Even the bailiff, a man who had seen every variety of courtroom drama, looked uncertain about whether to nod, salute, or simply step back. The air shifted with her movement. A faint murmur rippled from the backbenches, the kind that erupts when people realize they are watching something irreversible. Meri didn't acknowledge anyone. Her eyes, calm but unreadable, scanned the room once. Not with defiance, not with fear, but with the kind of quiet composure only people who have already survived the worst can possess. She moved toward the front, each footstep landing like punctuation in a story she had waited years to tell. When she reached the plaintiff's table, she placed the folder down with a soft thud. A small, almost polite sound, but one that rang louder than any gavel strike. Then she sat, no fidgeting, no nervous glances. Her posture said everything her voice had not yet said. I am done being silent. Across the aisle, Kody's silhouette appeared in the doorway. The cameras turned as one. A pivoting storm of lenses and whispers. He entered with his usual calculated stride, the one that had always served him well in public. Shoulders squared, chin high, the faint smirk that had once charmed millions, now clinging desperately to his face, like an old habit he didn't know how to break. But this wasn't a set, and there were no retakes here. His confidence looked misplaced under the courtroom's fluorescent honesty. For a brief moment, their eyes almost met, Meri's and his, but she didn't give him the dignity of acknowledgement. She stared past him, beyond him, as if he were just another shadow cast by a truth she had already dragged into the light. The judge entered moments later, her black robe trailing authority, and the murmurs vanished. A single cough somewhere in the gallery echoed too loudly before dying away. Papers shuffled. The gavel struck once. All rise. They did. All be seated. They did. And just like that, the machinery of justice began to hum. But this morning, it didn't hum in rhythm. The court's usual rhythm, procedure, order, formality, stumbled. Something was off balance, like a metronome suddenly skipping a beat. Even the judge, flipping through her notes, paused when her eyes caught the label on the folder, now sitting on the evidence table. Exhibit A, Brown Family Holdings. When the clerk passed it to her, she ran a finger across the embossed name and frowned slightly, as though touching a relic she didn't expect to find here. "You're certain this is admissible?" she asked, almost rhetorically. Meri's lawyer, a tall woman with the composure of a glacier, nodded. "Every document verified, Your Honor. Audio transcript included." The judge's brows arched just slightly. "Audio? Late night recording," the attorney replied. "Relevant to coercion and financial misrepresentation." The word coercion dropped into the courtroom like a live wire. Somewhere, a reporter whispered it under their breath, testing its echo. When the audio began to play, the sound system crackled faintly, the kind of static that makes you lean forward instinctively. Then came the knock, 3 dull thuds against wood, a door opening, then Robyn's voice. Fragile, trembling, but deliberate. "I can't keep doing this," she said. "It's not right, Kody. You said," and then his voice. Calm, cool, familiar. The kind of voice that had once soothed and sold, now turned thin and dangerous. "You'll do what I tell you," he said. "Burn this or be buried." The words weren't screamed. They didn't need to be. They were surgical in their cruelty. Efficient, practiced, almost bored. The courtroom froze. The judge didn't move. A reporter's pen rolled off a table and clattered to the floor, and no one stooped to pick it up. In those 6 words, the myth collapsed. This wasn't the charming patriarch, the television father, the self-styled leader of faith and family. This was control unmasked. This was power laid bare. Not as charisma, but as quiet, untraceable threat. Meri sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable. But those who knew her, even from a distance, could see the shift, the slightest exhale, the faintest tremor of release. She had carried this moment in her chest for too long. The moment when proof would speak louder than charm. The judge's gavel struck again, though it was more for order than for sound. "We will maintain decorum," she said, her voice steady but not indifferent. Yet even she couldn't fully conceal the change in her eyes. The flicker that comes when a human being witnesses cruelty turned evidence. The lawyer continued. More documents followed. Bank transfers, property deeds, signatures that didn't match, pages that had been altered, rewritten, notarized in absentia. With each one, the weight in the room grew thicker. Meri's folder wasn't just paper. It was testimony. Years of silence stacked neatly, alphabetized, cross-referenced. Every omission, every forged initial, every lie disguised as "trust me," was now ink under fluorescent light. For years, Kody had built a fortress of narrative, a public version of events that looked so clean, so complete, that it had nearly convinced everyone, including the people trapped inside it. But paper doesn't lie. Ink doesn't bend to charisma. When the judge ordered the folder officially entered into evidence, the courtroom transformed. It wasn't a stage anymore. It was an excavation site. Each document was a fossil of manipulation, a trace of how control had been systematized into paperwork and silence. A reporter whispered, "This is the end of him." Another answered softly, "No, this is the beginning of her." The hush that followed wasn't awe. It was surrender. The collective realization that the story they'd all consumed for years had been incomplete, perhaps willfully so. No more whispers. No more "trust me." The time for interpretation was over. The ledger would now speak. And in that moment, Meri, who had been sidelined, diminished, edited down to a sympathetic subplot, finally held the microphone. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke for her. Her calm wasn't resignation. It was revelation. She wasn't here to destroy a man. She was here to reclaim truth. The courtroom watched, spellbound, as she turned slightly toward the gallery. Her eyes swept across the crowd. The reporters, the former fans, the doubters, the believers. And for a second, even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Her face wasn't triumphant, it was steady, and in that steadiness lay the quiet terror of someone who has learned that survival itself can be an act of defiance. Outside, the world waited for headlines. Inside, the truth was still breathing, and as the judge recessed for the day, Kody stood motionless, his composure cracking at the edges. The silence that followed wasn't victory. It was accountability, the kind that doesn't end when the cameras stop. For years he had been the storyteller, but today, the story had turned on its author. The gavel struck one final time. Court adjourned. Meri rose, gathered the folder, and walked out. No statement, no glance back. But the myth, the legend, the performance, it stayed behind, gasping for air in the silence she left behind. The courtroom had inhaled as one, and now finally it exhaled truth. And now finally it exhaled truth. They said family was a fortress. The papers proved it a house of cards. And tonight, every card was counted. When Robyn stepped forward, the expected tremor of a guilty woman was replaced by something else. The kind of tremor born from years of silence, from the exhaustion of carrying another person's version of truth. She did not glance toward Kody, though she could feel the gravitational pull of his stare. For so long that gaze had governed her, measured her, rewritten her. Now it was only background noise against the soft, relentless hum of the fluorescent lights. The bailiff guided her to the stand. The microphone adjusted to her height, and in that quiet procedural gesture, a decade of unspoken complicity began to unravel. Her oath was brief, the mechanical recitation of words that have crowned both saints and liars. But when she said, "So help me God," her voice carried something that made even the stenographer pause. Not piety, but release. This was not performance. It was autopsy. She began without embellishment. There was no plea for sympathy, no practiced tears, only a chronology. A series of small administrative betrayals that had accumulated into an empire of deceit. "He would leave papers for me on the counter," she said, hands folded. "He'd tell me it was routine, that all wives signed them. He said it was about insurance, about property management, about standard authorizations." Her tone was factual, clinical even, but each sentence exposed a vein. When I asked questions, he'd say, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." She looked up then, and the entire courtroom understood the architecture of fear that had been hidden in those domestic exchanges. Coercion rarely announces itself in thunder. It seeps in through everyday obedience. Robyn's testimony was an anatomy lesson in that seepage. How good faith can be trained into submission. How consent can be eroded by repetition until silence becomes policy. The prosecutor let her speak, intervening only to steady chronology. When she described finding the folder, the one that would later ignite everything, the room leaned in. She had opened a drawer looking for tax receipts and found instead a map of accounts she didn't know existed. Wire transfers to shell corporations, notarized statements from banks she had never visited, leases signed in her name for properties she had never seen. "I thought it was a mistake," she said softly. But the handwriting was his. From the gallery, a rustle of movement, reporters turning pages, pens scratching. Meri sat near the front, unmoving. She had heard this version privately before, in fragments. On the night Robyn appeared at her door, trembling with the folder, clutched like a weapon. But hearing it now, under oath, before a judge, it became something else. Testimony turned into evidence. The judge's eyes did not waver. She had presided over enough civil and criminal entanglements to know when a story carried the ring of lived truth. There was a rhythm to authenticity, a cadence that even practiced liars could not counterfeit. Robyn's voice carried that rhythm now, fragile but exact. Unadorned by self-pity, she detailed the night visits, the late-hour arguments, the subtle threats that were never phrased as threats. He'd say, "You don't want to make enemies of the people who sign your checks." The sentence hung in the air, heavy and bureaucratic, the kind of menace that hides in plain business language. The prosecutor projected copies of the documents on the courtroom screen. Leases, checks, tax filings. The paper trail glowed under sterile light like forensic photographs. Each signature was a scar, each date a wound reopened. The audience of journalists scribbled furiously, sensing that history was mutating in real time. This was no longer the tabloid soap of fractured marriage. It was systemic fraud in the shape of domestic trust. Meri's folder, once dismissed as gossip, now functioned as the axis of the case. Each page was authenticated, cross-referenced, time-stamped. There were moments when Kody's name appeared in margins, his initials beside corrections, his handwriting looping across the forged consents. It was as if he had left breadcrumbs out of arrogance. Evidence born from the belief that he could narrate reality faster than truth could catch up. When the recording played, the same one that had detonated the first hearing, it landed differently now. The words were no longer just private cruelty. They were corroboration. "I'll bury her in paperwork," Kody's voice said, calm, almost amused. The courtroom reacted not with gasps, but with a collective tightening of air. The judge's pen stopped mid-note. The bailiff shifted uneasily. There is a difference between hearing malice and hearing method, and this was the latter. A blueprint for erasure, articulated with chilling composure. Robyn lowered her eyes as the recording ended. The silence afterward was the kind that accumulates in sacred spaces. Not awe, but reckoning. She inhaled, exhaled, then continued. "I didn't leave because I thought he'd destroy me. I left because I realized he already had." Her words were small but seismic. They reframed her not as the accomplice the tabloids had painted, but as one more casualty of his control. The prosecutor let the silence linger. Strategic mercy. The defense rose for cross-examination, but the effect was anticlimactic. The attorney's questions were technical. When exactly did you find the folder? Did you ever directly witness your client forging a signature? Each query shrank under the weight of the evidence. Robyn answered simply, her tone unwavering. "I found it on March 11th. The handwriting was his. The bank confirmed the transfers. Facts. Dry, indestructible. The defense could not puncture them. They could only circle them helplessly." By the time she stepped down, the narrative had transformed. What began as family drama was now case law in motion. The judge called for a recess, but the courtroom did not exhale. Everyone understood that something irreversible had occurred. The emotional gravity had shifted. The myth dismantled by the mundane instruments of verification, checks, signatures, recordings. Outside, night pressed against the courthouse windows, reflecting faces back at themselves. Reporters, spectators, former fans who had once believed the show. Now, in the reflection, they saw their own complicity, the public appetite that had sustained the illusion, the fascination that had fed the man's myth. The fortress had not been built by one architect alone. It had been crowdsourced by collective indulgence. When proceedings resumed, the financial investigator took the stand. Her testimony was colder, more mathematical. Alleges vengeance. "We traced the funds through 6 separate accounts," she explained, pointing to a projected diagram of arrows and numbers. "The pattern indicates deliberate obfuscation. Each account was registered under family names, including minors, to distribute liability." She looked toward the defense table only once. These are not bookkeeping errors. They are calculated diversions. Kody's attorney objected. Relevance? Conjecture. But the judge overruled. The diagrams remained on screen, like a confession drawn in geometry. The fortress of family finances had indeed been a house of cards, and each numbered arrow was a gust of wind. Robyn watched without expression. It was too late for vindication. What she felt was not victory but exhaustion. The final unraveling of a decade-long script. Her testimony had stripped away her villain's costume, but it had also stripped away illusion entirely. Freedom, she was learning, often arrives dressed as ruin. Meri met her gaze across the room. No words passed between them, but there was recognition. The understanding that survival sometimes requires betrayal of a false peace. They had both been rewritten by the same author, both erased in service of his control, and now both had chosen to rewrite him through evidence. When the court adjourned, the crowd surged again. Cameras flashed. Microphones hovered. Do you feel vindicated? Was Kody abusive? Did you expect this outcome? Robyn ignored them, walking steadily toward the courthouse doors. The night air hit her face like absolution. She didn't know what tomorrow's headlines would call her. Accomplice, victim, whistleblower. But for the first time in years, the labels didn't matter. She had spoken in her own voice, under oath, in a room where truth had legal consequence. That was enough. Inside, Kody remained seated, his hands clasped, his jaw rigid. For years he had controlled the edit. Now he could not even control his breathing. The cameras outside waited for him, but he did not move. The prosecutor's closing remark still echoed in the chamber. Power built on trust is not ownership, it's stewardship. And stewardship leaves records. It was not poetry, but it might as well have been his epitaph. The judge's decision to extend the inquiry to the district attorney's office sealed the transformation from scandal to case. A special audit was ordered, financial documents subpoenaed, associates interviewed. The machinery of accountability, once set in motion, does not stop for charm. It grinds forward, impersonal and thorough, until every discrepancy finds its home in a footnote or a charge. Weeks passed. The news cycle tried to keep pace, but the legal process operated at its own tempo. Slow, methodical, lethal. Subpoenas arrived like clockwork. Bank officials were deposed. Accountants surrendered records. Each revelation confirmed what the papers had already whispered. The family's empire had been financed by quiet theft. From partners, from wives, from trust itself. Robyn's public image evolved in real time. The corridors outside the courtroom carried a different kind of silence. Not relief, but reckoning. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly, catching the metallic edge of camera tripods. As journalists waited, their microphones poised like bayonets. They weren't just chasing a headline now. They were chasing the collapse of a myth. Kody, who had once orchestrated every glance, every confession, every public apology, now walked under the glare of a light he could not dim. His lawyer whispered, "Keep walking, don't react," but the advice landed hollow. The lenses tracked him like predators. Every twitch of his jaw, every tightening of his hand, was immortalized in pixels before he even reached the exit. Meri didn't follow immediately. She waited by the witness bench, the black folder still pressed to her chest. The bailiff held the door open for her, but she didn't move. She looked toward the empty chair Kody had occupied, the indentation in the leather still visible. And for a moment, her eyes softened, not with pity, but with the strange calm that comes after a long-held truth is finally spoken aloud. She had not destroyed him. She had simply stopped protecting him. When she finally stepped into the corridor, the reporters swarmed, questions colliding mid-air. Did you expect the recording to have that impact? Are you cooperating with prosecutors? Is this the end of the Brown family enterprise? She said nothing. Silence was her only remaining act of authorship. Inside the courtroom, the clerks gathered the exhibits with meticulous care. Each page was placed into sealed envelopes, each recording catalogued, each signature preserved. It wasn't spectacle now. It was evidence, becoming history. The room that had seen years of performance had for a single day become sacred with truth. Across the city, news outlets went live within minutes. Graphics blazed across screens. Voice recording confirms threat in Brown case. Financial misconduct allegations escalate to criminal referral. The familiar faces of talk show hosts filled living rooms, dissecting motives, framing narratives, spinning empathy and outrage like threads on a loom. Yet something was different this time. The tone had shifted. The myth of Kody, the charming patriarch, the misunderstood leader, the man burdened by too many responsibilities, no longer fit the evidence being shown. What had once been family tension was now unmistakably financial coercion and deception. Christine sat in her car long after the courthouse emptied. The radio was playing one of Kody's old interviews, a clip from years before, where he'd laughed about family disagreements and how people love drama. She turned it off mid-sentence. Her hands were trembling, but not from fear. There was relief in them, the kind that comes only after realizing you no longer owe anyone silence. Robyn, meanwhile, had vanished into a hotel near the edge of town. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Messages from producers, lawyers, reporters. But she didn't answer. She sat by the window, watching traffic lights change colors without meaning. For the first time, she began to understand what it meant to have your name in ink on a document you didn't write. And for the first time, she didn't rush to defend him. She simply sat there, letting the weight of understanding settle where denial used to live. Back in the courtroom, the judge remained for a while after everyone left. She looked down at the exhibits once more, tracing her eyes across the official stamps, the signatures, the printed dates. She'd seen families collapse before, but not like this. Not so publicly, not so carefully televised in its slow-motion undoing. There was something almost Shakespearean about it. The man who built his own legend, undone by the receipts of his own making. She made a note in the margin of her docket. Proceed with DA referral. Ensure transcript sealed until preliminary review. Then she closed the file. Her work was methodical, unpoetic, but in its way, it was the poetry of accountability. That night, the courthouse steps glowed under streetlights. A janitor swept up coffee cups and torn notepads left behind by the press. The faint echo of camera shutters had finally faded. And yet, in that quiet, the weight of what had transpired lingered. For all the noise that fame brings, its downfall happens in silence, in the turning of keys on evidence lockers, in the signing of legal forms, in the small but permanent act of truth recorded on paper. Kody returned to his rented apartment, far from the estate that had once been his kingdom. His phone blinked with unanswered calls. Social media had already devoured him. Headlines, commentary, armchair verdicts. He sat by the window, staring at the city lights, each one a reminder of how many people were now watching. The very audience he once courted had become his jury. He poured a drink, set it down, didn't touch it. For the first time, he realized that there was no version of this he could edit. There was no confession he could control, no interview he could manipulate. The story was no longer his to tell. It had become evidence. And evidence doesn't care for charm. In another part of town, Meri placed the black folder on her kitchen table. The house was quiet. She didn't turn on the TV. She didn't need to. The noise of public reaction couldn't add or subtract from what she had done. On the table, the folder looked ordinary now. Paper, plastic, ink. Yet she knew what it contained. Her years of silence, transformed into something with weight. Proof. The kind of proof that no apology could erase. She opened a window. Cool night air drifted in, carrying faint sounds from the distant highway. For the first time in years, she felt no need to look over her shoulder. Truth, she realized, was not liberation in the cinematic sense. It didn't come with applause or tears. It came quietly, like a door unlocking after a long confinement. It didn't fix what was broken, but it stopped the breaking. By morning, the headlines would mutate. Some would cast her as brave, others as vindictive. The cycle would spin, but she didn't belong to that cycle anymore. Her story was now in the hands of something slower and steadier than media: the law. For Kody, the reckoning had only begun. Investigators would follow the trail the judge had referred. The signatures, the transfers, the recordings. Each fact, small on its own, would assemble into a pattern too intricate to dismiss. His name, once synonymous with control, would now appear in legal documents stripped of persona. Defendant, the man who built the story, had been outwritten by reality itself. Weeks later, when the first pre-trial motions began, the courtroom was smaller, quieter. No cameras were allowed this time. Just lawyers, clerks, and the persistent hum of the air conditioner. Kody sat at the defense table, a shadow of the man who once filled television screens. He didn't speak. The judge entered, notes in hand, and the session began without spectacle. The machinery of justice was not theatrical. It was mechanical, procedural, relentless. Each motion, each ruling, each scheduling date moved the story forward in increments of law, not narrative. Outside, the world moved on. But inside that room, time slowed, locked into the rhythm of accountability. And Meri, she didn't attend. She didn't need to. Her role was already complete. She had handed the truth to the one place that could translate it into consequence. Whatever became of Kody now would happen beyond her reach. And that, too, was its own form of peace. The story would live on, of course. Documentaries, interviews, retrospectives. But none would capture what it truly felt like in that room. The moment when performance finally collapsed under the weight of fact. That was the quiet miracle of it all. That amid noise and fame and manipulation, the truth had still found a way through. In the end, it wasn't rage that destroyed him. It was paperwork. Paper. The thing he had underestimated, dismissed as mere formality. Paper that could outlast charm, that didn't forget, that spoke